Joining me now for more perspective on those U.S. airstrikes, we have political analyst Issa joining us from London. Issa, how significant is this move by the UN Security Council to stem the flow of foreign fighters to Iraq and Syria?
Well, it's very significant. It's long overdue because it should have happened years ago. First of all, the flow of these militants has happened because there was regional powers who have been relaxed with their borders and allowed the flow of those fighters from countries as far as the Chechnya and Europe, as well as the North Africa. There is also the relaxations about their activities. Nobody, the West, have turned a blind eye initially about their activities, thinking that this was a group that's going to topple the Syrian government. However, their crimes and their brutality is not just against all of humanity. And it's evident that this group, and we have been warning about their crimes and their expansions and potential danger to the whole of the world, has been extremely worrying, not just to the region, but to the world. We also have to look at one thing which has been forgotten from all of those statements. You could clear all their finances, some of their finances, you could clear the flow of fighters, but also you could tackle the recruitments. There is one issue that has not been tackled, I think, in this recent resolutions, is the doctrine that has instigated those Takfiri and those extremist groups to adopt this element of violence against humanity.
All right, I want to bring in my second guest now from the U.S. city of Boston, political analyst Danny Welch. Mr. Welch, if I could just get your thoughts on some of that, how much of an impact are these U.S. airstrikes on IS positions in Iraq and Syria really having on the overall activities of the militant group?
Well, I don't think they're designed for that. I think it's a backdoor into continuing the U.S. war on Syria and to try to effect regime change there. So since they're not designed for that purpose, I can't imagine they'll have much effect. I add also, it's always chilling to hear a U.S. president speak at the UN General Assembly, but this was especially grim. I know that Hugo Chavez has left this earth, but from wherever he is now, he's looking down, and I'm sure he can still smell the sulfur from there.
Now, Mr. Welch, let's consider for a moment that terrorists are not the only ones who've suffered from these strikes, but also several civilians have also.
That's right.
So what does this say about the real motives of Western powers?
The real motives are to let it be known that we can bomb anyone we want, anywhere we want. If you look at Obama's speech and take exactly the opposite of virtually every word he said, you might get some semblance of truth. It's amazing that someone could stand there and be so brazen in flouting the truth and pushing the opposite of what his own agenda is. It's a shocking. I think Orwell and Kafka and Huxley were all taking notes today. Seriously, then he mentions Ukraine in the same breath, where the retreat of the fascist junta that his government has backed has yielded these mass graves and war crimes, beheadings, torturings, organs missing. So to say that we're fighting extremism is laughable if it weren't so dangerous and dishonest.
All right, I want to go back to London with Mr. Issa. If Washington refuses to ally itself with Damascus, does this ultimately suggest that these strikes are aimed more at undermining and attacking the Syrian government?
I think so. My reading from the American statement is trying to undermine any resolve to the conflict from the beginning. There was instigation for peaceful resolve, and this was undermined by the American and Western policies. On the ground here, it is undermining the force and the issues that was raised by the Syrian government. From the beginning, the Syrian government has been warning about extremisms and the terrorist groups. Now, if we go back to their statements, they asked the world to join them in the fight of terrorism. The world stood aside and took a turned a blind eye and did not want to join the Syrian government in their fight of terrorism. It is still a fight backed by Western powers to topple the regime in Syria, but under a different umbrella now. It's fighting extremisms. Although the cause fighting extremism is humble, but are they there to fight extremisms? Where does it end? The end is unknown. I think we will see an intervention, potential intervention, or a long-term intervention in that region, northern eastern region of Syria and in Iraq. Hopefully the West will come to their senses and they will put hands in hands with all of the parties in the region, be it Syria, be it Iraq, be it Turkey, be it the Jordan and the regional powers there, to stem the flow.
Now, if I may, you do bring up a very valid point here. What kind of international ramifications could we see as a result of these strikes? I mean, is this U.S.-led coalition really only making things worse?
Let me highlight a point. Tackling extremisms and tackling militant groups is an important issue, and the world has to be united to tackle those militant groups. But the way it was done with sidetracking two very important, influential regional parties, which is Iran and Syria, will work negatively. They must involve all the powers and all of the parties on the ground. You cannot tackle extremisms and you cannot tackle those groups. At the end, they have a fertile ground unless you involve the Syrian government and the regional powers. At the end of the day, this group is danger not just to the region but to the whole of the world.
All right, we are going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank both of my guests, political analyst Mr. Issa in London and political analyst Mr. Danny Welch in Boston. Thanks a lot for both of you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.